Hey guys, this is OCB Communications. Welcome to my review of TerrorVision. TerrorVision is a 1986 horror comedy directed by Ted Nicolaou, who also helped write the screenplay along with some help from Charles Band. Now, the movie is also produced by Charles and Albert Band, as well as another collaborator named Deborah Dion. And the film was released through Empire Pictures, which is, was a company that the bands created to produced their films, and it only lasted for a few years in the mid to late 80s, and then it went under. And then afterwards, Charles Band would go on to create Full Moon Pictures. Now, Ted Nicolaou, this isn't the first film he's directed. Actually, he directed a segment of The Dungeon Master a year before the release of TerrorVision in 1985, and so Ted Nicolaou is not necessarily new to Empire Pictures. Now, it seems like Ted Nicolaou was a good friend of Charles Band, and Ted Nicolaou would actually go on to direct more movies for Charles Band's production company, Full Moon, after Empire went under. Now, such films like Bad Channels, which in 1992, which is very similar in style and even thematically wise to this film, TerrorVision, and Ted Nicolaou would also go on to direct the first Subspecies movie. Now, the film stars Chad Allen as Sherman Putterman, who is pretty much the main lead of the film. He's a kid, this young kid who's obsessed with the military and whatever, wants to be a soldier, thanks to his grandfather, who's played by Bert Ramsen, Grandpa Putterman, was a former vet, and he's very obsessed with the military. And you can kind of get the gist that maybe he's a little bit out there. Maybe he has a little bit of, mental health sort of issues. And you get a little bit of a gist that maybe Sherman might have a little problems too, because he takes pills for whatever sort of medical, psychological thing he has going on, which made me worry that there was going to be some bullshit twist at the end, that it was all going to be in his head. And you know why? Because the same kid, Chad Allen, who plays Sherman in this, plays the kid Tommy Westfall. And he plays Tommy Westfall, and I know that name might not sound familiar to you, but for those of you who are familiar with the show Saint Elsewhere, that is a name that you just hate. You hate that name. Tommy Westfall is the name of a character in Saint Elsewhere, which in the last episode of the show, you find out that the entire show took place in his head. So Chad Allen played that character. Chad Allen would go on to, after TerrorVision, would go on to play Tommy Westfall, the kid the autistic kid who dreamt up St. Elsewhere, the entire show, an Emmy Award-winning show, in his head. So that's definitely why I was wondering, please don't end with all being in his head, because he's crazy. It didn't end like that, but I did have an issue with the ending, though, because it did feel a bit rushed. Now, the overall film, though, I thought was pretty enjoyable. The rest of the cast is pretty solid. You have an actress named Diane Franklin who plays Susie Putterman. She looked completely unrecognizable to what I'm used to her being in. And used to the sort of look that I'm used to seeing her in the films that I know she was in. She was in Amityville 2: The Possession as Sonny's sister. She was more of a girl next door type in that film. Although she did have a moment where she was kind of being a little bit slutty, but that was pretty much. Actually, that might have been a complete. I think it's the same actress. Like, it could be completely wrong. She could have been a younger girl then, and I could be completely off. And if I am, it sucks to be me. I haven't seen Amityville 2 in a while, so I could be completely wrong. But I know she was one of the cast members in Amityville 2: The Possession. But I know for sure, though, she played Princess Joanna in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Not The Bogus Journey, because a different actress played Princess Joanna in that film. She played Princess Joanna in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and there she looks more like a princess. Here looks like a typical 80s cliche. She's got the rainbow Cyndi Lauper hairdo going on. She's talking in 80s quotes and 80s one-liners, like totally tubular, or oh, that's grody, or that's just gross, like totally gross. This is really, really, really like gag me with the spoon, type dialogue. But I think it was totally done that way on purpose, because I believe the script is a lot more clever than people seem to give it credit for. is the majority of the time you hear this movie being mentioned as one of those so bad it's good movies. To me, though, I think it's intentionally bad. It's intentionally over the top. It's intentionally, the acting is intentionally bad. The everything is intentionally silly and over the top and zany and just all kinds of it's just totally a B movie. It is definitely a homage to the 50s B movies, as well as a unique send-up of 1980s culture. Definitely the character Susie is totally an 80s cliche and is totally parodying that type of personality and that type of character, because that was a character in the 80s. People actually did act like that, and that's just that somewhat dates the film, but in a way it also helps it helps it have a little bit more impact, and it helps it stand a little bit more stand the test of time, because yes, in a way it does date the film with this character, but it also makes you, oh, years later you're like, yeah, that's actually pretty clever, because I think it was intentionally a parody of 80s culture and 80s, just the 80s in period. And you even have Jonathan Gries, who plays OD, who plays her boyfriend, who's a big metalhead, and he wears this horrible looking wig. Looks like he's wearing yarn on top of his head. Might as well just call him Metalhead Andy, because the guy just really looked fake as hell. And Jonathan Gries, you might know him as the Wolfman from the Monster Squad, and he was also had a bit role as another werewolf type of monster in Fright Night Part 2. Here though, Jonathan Gries is playing this really over the top, typical metalhead doofus, and it's definitely not meant to be taken seriously. And the fact that the film doesn't just has a tongue firmly in its left cheek the entire time, the fact that it's definitely trying to be a camp B movie, it adds to the film's entertainment, and it makes it a really fun, entertaining movie. And I thought it was actually pretty funny. I definitely did chuckle more than once at some of the lines of dialogue and some of the scenarios in the movie. There are some problems I do have with the film. Like I said, the ending I think is rushed. I think some of the characters can get annoying, especially Susie. I know it's on purpose, but it still doesn't change the fact that after a while, her character makes you want to blow your brains out, because she's really, really obnoxious. And don't mind that. That's just my mom disciplining the cat, who's being dumb, just like some of the characters in this movie. Now, Garrett Grahams is another character he really got annoying and obnoxious because he was so clueless, but that was on purpose. There were some moments where that was pretty funny. He plays the mom, the mom, fuck, the dad, what the fuck? Did the fucking creature eat my brain? Because that's a fuck up. Stop! Garrett Graham plays Stanley Putterman, who's the father and the mother. No, he's the father of Sherman and Susie, and his wife is played by Mary Woronov, who plays Raquel Putterman. And these are totally clueless, over-the-top, ridiculous, stereotyped characters. Garrett Graham's character seems like he's stuck in the 70s. He's even wearing like leisure suits and the necklaces and shit. Mary Woronov is clueless as well, but it seems like she's trying to be a little bit more with the trends. And there's this whole sort of joke where they're trying to be swingers, which is like totally a 70s thing. So it seems like they're completely lost. And so, in a way, it's sort of a parody of the 70s a little bit, and a parody of the 80s, as well as a parody of 50s B movies. Now, you have a few other cast members. You have Jennifer Richards, who plays Medusa, this horror hostess of this show called Medusa's Monster Madness, which I believe is what it's called. I could be completely wrong. It could have been Medusa's Monster Marathon or something. But either way, I really like Jennifer Richards' performance in this. There's a really fun character. She's got a nice rack, but she's also got a nice personality. Definitely a send-up of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and her TV series, Elvira's Movie Macabre. So, but I definitely did enjoy the character Medusa. I really did like that character. And at points she reminded me of Adrienne Barbeau's character from Creepshow. You know, the bitchy, you know, wife of Henry. You know, Henry! Henry! It was the same sort of, you know, high-pitched, sort of irritating tone of voice. But I still enjoyed the character of Medusa. She was nice to look at, but she was also pretty fun, a fun character. Now, you also had Frank Welker, who did the voice of the Hungry Beast Alien, which the effects for the Beast Alien were done by John Carl Buechler, who did a really great job. The creature design in this is a real standout. The makeup effects are really well done for such a low budget. Even the visual effects are all right for, you know, for what they were supposed to do. In the beginning of the movie, you have a prologue which looks really shitty. This planet, the planet Pluto, which there's no doubt about it. It was intentionally done that way, and sort of like a homage to 50s B movie sort of way, just like the 1980s Flash Gordon had intentionally bad special effects. I think that scene in the beginning was definitely done that way on purpose. And so then after the prologue, you get actually a really cool opening credits scene with a really fun song called TerrorVision. And I really enjoyed the song. I think it's really a lot of fun by the Fibonaccis. The Fibonaccis. I don't know how you pronounce it properly, but I really enjoyed the song. I really did. I really liked that song. And sadly, their career didn't take off after this. Charles Band wanted them to see if he could use their music in this movie and make them big, but it didn't work because the movie barely made any money in the box office. But I guess it made a cult following in the years since and became sort of a cult hit on home video. So it definitely does have its fan base. I mean, it has a decent following. I think it even has a fan website. So, and it got a recent release from Scream Factory with features on Blu-ray. So there's definitely a fan base for this film. And I guess I could kind of understand it. I mean, if you're a fan of 50s B movies, I mean, you probably have a nice soft spot for this movie because this movie does, you know, reference a lot of them and is in a way much like a 50s B movie. You know, it's just as dumb and just as silly as any of those movies are. You have a lot of you know, scenes from those movies that are in this film. Earth versus the Flying Saucers. There's a sequence from that in this movie. There's a sequence from The Giant Claw, which is another terrible movie, and then there's, you know, B movie from the 50s, I believe, or is it the 40s or whatever. And then you have a clip from Robot Monster, the infamously terrible bad movie, one of the worst movies of all time that's in the film. So you can tell that it's definitely sort of like a send up or homage to those type of movies. It's definitely more of a comedy than a horror film. It's not. If I was going to reference another director who kind of does a lot of horror comedy, but Frank Henenlotter. Frank Henenlotter, this is as zany and sort of over the top as a Frank Henenlotter film would be, but it doesn't have the grit and it doesn't have the edge, and it's not as offensive as Frank Henenlotter's films are. And I wouldn't say it's as funny. I think Frank Henenlotter has a little bit more of a better grasp on surreal humor than Ted Nicolaou. But there are some moments, though, that made me laugh and were really fun. And there is some perverted moments. Like the entire art design in the Putterman's home is just something else. I mean, it is literally, it's just naked bodies, titties on the wall, you know, fucking scenes of people in different sexual positions, including one painting where there's a dominatrix with a whip in there, on one of her hands. You know, it's really ready to whip this guy into shape. And you know, literally, you know, whip this guy, you know, and I guess just loves the pain and the pleasure, and you have references to pleasure and like welcome to the Pleasure Dome, which I'm like, Frankie says relax, what? Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, really? uh, okay. Relax, don't do it, don't put up these offensive, sexy, trashy, sleazy paintings in your bedroom. Relax. Seriously, they're really, really sleazy. And the movie definitely does have a little bit of sleazy undertone because of that. but nowhere near as sleazy as Frank Henenlotter. Uh, but you know, Frank Henenlotter just does the sleazy horror comedy, like, he's just one of the greats at that. But I still enjoyed the movie all right for what it was. Now, like I was saying, after you have the prologue and you have the opening credits, and then you get introduced, what happens is you have Garrett Graham has got this new satellite dish, and he's trying to get it to work with the help of this repairman guy who loves some Heine. Heine, not butt. He doesn't love butt. He loves his Heine, aka Heineken. And so he loves some Heine, and he's asked to fix the thing, but he says it's not under my warranty. You have to do it yourself. So he got this cheap satellite, tries to put it together, and what happens is in the prologue, one of these aliens ended up turning this monster beast into energy in a way of disposing of it. So he sends the energy into outer space, and the energy, basically, I don't know, discombobulated, torn apart into energy particles version of the monster ends up in the satellite dish, makes it act all weird and crazy. And this is while the whole, family is trying to switch the channels. And there's one scene where they switch a channel to MTV, and there's a Wasp song that plays, which is called Tormentor. And you get a brief glimpse of Blackie Lawless singing on the TV. And they have a fun line of dialogue from Grandpa where he's basically saying, intellectual decay, turn it off, it'll rot your brain cells, it's an international conspiracy. So he was like, he doesn't like MTV, but of course Susie's the one like, switch it to MTV, like totally awesome, and she's like, I love this song. And then, her boyfriend, OD, played by Jonathan Gries, is also a big Wasp fan. He even has a Wasp t-shirt. And then Ted Nicolaou actually has a previous connection to Wasp because he casted Blackie Lawless and the lead singer of Wasp in a brief bit role in The Dungeon Master. And it was nice to see more Wasp in TerrorVision, another film that Ted Nicolaou did. And I really like Wasp anyway. Wasp is one of my all-time favorite 80s metal bands. I really love that band. I love a lot of their songs. I think they're one of the best. I think they're one of the greatest 80s hair metal bands of all time, to be honest. I think Wasp just kicks a lot of ass. And I really enjoyed a little bit that they had a Tormentor. It was really pretty fun to see that. And so then after they switch from MTV, they even they're switching through channels. There's like an orgy with a sex orgy, and I'm like, hey, is that a cut scene from Caligula? And then they flip the channel from the orgy to the MTV, then they flip it back to, then they switch the TV the satellite messes up because the energy, the broken down creature that was turned into energy ends up inside this satellite dish and makes it go fucking crazy. And they thought the TV was broken, but it actually fixes itself, and it ends up on the channel where Medusa's Monster Madness show is showing. And so Grandpa Putterman and Sherman Putterman, they really like monster movies, so they end up sitting down watching it. Mary Woronov and Garrett Graham end up going off to some dance dance hall thing or whatever. They do some dancing thing, I guess. And so they go off and do this dancing thing, leave Sherman alone with his grandfather, and Susie goes off with her boyfriend OD, not girlfriend. What the fuck? I did it again. What the? So it goes with her boyfriend OD. And I'm about ready to OD and what? I mean, fuck. God damn it. So he goes with Susie, and they end up, I don't know where they went. They went off in his car somewhere. And so you have Sherman and his grandfather alone while they're sleeping. The monster comes out of the TV. And Sherman wakes up, sees it, screams. Grandpa sees it too, but he doesn't think it's a monster because the monster is going back in the TV real quick, so he thinks it's a burglar. He's wearing those Halloween masks. And then he goes into his bedroom, which is a bomb shelter that's part of the house / pleasure dome. And he ends up he has this whole the bomb shelter's full of like guns and grenades and like explosives, the C4 and all this kind of crazy shit. And he also really likes lizard tail jerky for some reason. And so he ends up going in there with Sherman, and they get some weapons, and you know, because they think that it's a robber. So he goes and looks for a robber. The capable repairman guy shows up again. Sees there's this nasty, slimy stuff that's coming out of the you know, dish control panel thing, and the monster ends up showing up and then eats him. And then Grandpa is actually the second one to go. The monster eats the cable guy first, and then the monster ends up eating Grandpa, and he ends up using this claw of his and punctures his face, and he ends up pretty much uh, liquefying him, pretty much, because it's sort of like how the fly eats. It uses it liquefies its food and then slurps it up. So all that's left of Grandpa is like this slimy mess. And now Sherman's alone with this creature, this monster, and he's freaked out, and he tries to call the cops. They think he's prank calling them. Tries to call Medusa. She thinks he's crazy. And then the monster ends up, you know, messing with him in the form of Medusa on TV, and gives him a little jolt. And then there's another one. Then what happens is his parents come home. They blame him for this mess, and they don't believe him that there's a monster. And ultimately, they bring along these two, like, swingers, I guess. Alejandro Rey's character Spiro is Greek, who also happens to be gay. Randi Brooks, who plays Cherry, who's this character, this actress who's been in, she's been in some movies. I mean, she was in Cop with, she played Joanne Pratt in Cop with James Woods. She was in Hamburger the Motion Picture the same year that TerrorVision came out. And so she's been in a few things. Nothing really particular, right? I mean, she's not even really that. She's a beautiful looking woman, but her acting is not the greatest in the world. But I think that was on purpose. I totally think that was on purpose. All the bad acting in this movie was intentional. So anyway, if it wasn't, then there's just bad acting. But some of the lines of dialogue, they're just totally jokes. There's no way it's meant to be taken seriously. So anyway, so Spiro and Cherry, I guess the whole thing was going to have Mary Woronov was going to swing with Spiro, but then he tells her he's gay, and because he wants to be totally Greek, so he's really interested in all aspects of Greek culture, including, you know, screwing other men. So he's more into Garrett Graham than he is Mary Woronov. The whole thing, of course, is that Garrett Graham is going to take Cherry. It was going to be the whole swinging sort of thing. You know, because they're two wild and crazy guys, swingers, and I'll just might as well have, you know, Bob, Ted, and Carol, and Alice, and the keys, and the bowl, and they switch them out, and I'll bang your wife, you bang mine, or you bang my husband, and so forth. That sort of thing. But anyway, the monster ends up getting the cherry, pops her cherry. Doesn't really pop her cherry literally, but he pops Cherry, eats her. The monster has this ability to also briefly sort of recreate itself into a clone of the person it ate, and it does that with Grandpa in one scene as well as Cherry. Cherry's in this jacuzzi, which is the Pleasure Dome, and what happens is the Spiro guy goes in the jacuzzi to try to get some, because I guess he's not really gay. I guess he was just screwing Mary Woronov over and saying, "You're too ugly for me. I'm going to say I'm gay just to get away from you." Like, what a dick. And he ends up getting eaten by the monster. And then Mary Woronov and Garrett Graham end up getting eaten too. And then Susie comes home with her boyfriend OD, and the monster ends up replicating in this really kind of really funny scene where the Susie goes in to check on her parents, and the monster has replicated them as well as the swingers and Grandpa, and she's like, "Ew, like totally gross, Mom, you know, ew." You know, because you know, it's you just have to see the scene. I can't really do it justice. But anyway, the monster actually, what happens is in this part of the film, it becomes a little bit of a different in tone. It becomes kind of like a family movie where the monster gets out of the TV, and just because it sees Jonathan Gries's gloves that have spikes on them, it reminds me of its owner, I guess, that used to feed him. And so he stops, he doesn't eat him, and so he's listening to Jonathan Gries. It becomes a sort of thing like, hey, it's a nice monster, and let's feed him some food, and let's, hey, teaching him things like, dude, this is food, this is music, you know, or this is TV. He's like, TV, you know, it's just like one of those, like, okay, where's this cutesy monster thing? This thing was eating people voraciously earlier. I understand it's a tongue-in-cheek type movie, but I just don't know where this came from. But anyway, it doesn't last long because then the monster sees on TV this alien guy who wears the same sort of gloves as OD does, and he realizes that he's the one that sent him, you know, and turned him into trash. So he's angry now and ends up killing OD, and now it's back to evil monster eating everybody. And the alien on the TV actually was trying to communicate to the people of Earth, saying that, telling them that turn off your satellite receivers, shut off your TVs. This monster, I made a mistake. This monster is going to kill everybody, just eat everybody in civilization. I'm sorry. You need to just, you know, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. You need to destroy your TV sets. But nobody's, of course, listening to him, and eventually he actually appears out of the TV and tries to help, because earlier Sherman and Susie tried to you know, stop the monster themselves. I thought they killed it by throwing the remote into the jacuzzi and electrocuting it, but that didn't work. They actually earlier they also called Medusa to try to come to the house because they thought that she might want to be in on this money-making monster thing, because they thought they'd be millionaires because they have a space monster that you know, can say words and so forth. But of course, you know how well that ends up. Medusa shows up, actually. She actually does show up because she thinks, because they said that there's a big party going on, and she's a big party girl when she gets off, you know, the set of her show. And then the alien guy comes out, and he's about ready to destroy the monster. And then she comes in, and she fucking kills the alien guy that's supposed to, you know, save everybody and save Earth. And she's like, what? What? I saved you. What? You know, come on. It's like, you killed him, you bitch. And it's our only hope. And so the monster then breaks through the wall and is I guess it's opening its mouth and is sucking everybody in with its air or its breath. I don't know how. And the kid, Sherman, picks up the gun. It's not working. The gun from the alien guy is supposed to disintegrate the monster. It's not working. And then pretty much what happens is the kid, Medusa, and everybody gets eaten. And the movie ends with Medusa is the driver for Medusa. He's asleep in her car. And the monster that's half Medusa now, it's still assimilating her and whatever, replicating her. And it taps him on the shoulder and says, get me to the studio, you know. And then that's the end of the movie. That's exactly why I feel the movie's a bit rushed. The ending is definitely a bit rushed. It seems like that they wanted to end it normally, like the kid ends up, you know, blowing the monster up and everything ends up okay, but they ran out of money or something, or whatever, so they ended up doing the haha gotcha ending, which I don't really care for. So, and so, yeah, TerrorVision is a movie that I can totally see why people would just think it's stupid and isn't very good, or it's just lame. But I wouldn't say that. I mean, the movie, it has a nice charm to it. It's entertaining. It's got some good creature design. It's got a cool idea of a monster that comes in and out of the TV set. And some nice performances by the cast members and so forth. The ending could have been a lot worse. Like I said, it could have all just been all in Sherman's head, which would have been infuriating. This ending was just like, okay, alright. But, you know, it could have been a better film for me if it had ended with Sherman maybe blowing the monster, or maybe Medusa ends up you know, making things right by picking up the gun and it works for her and kills the monster. And then, you know, you gonna thank me now, huh? I didn't just save your life, I saved the world! No, no. Now, you got anything to drink? So that would have been kind of fun. But anyway, as it is, though, I thought TerrorVision was a pretty entertaining, fun movie. And I really don't know what to say about the movie. It's rated out of 5 stars. I probably give it 3.5 out of 5. I think it's an above average flick. It's entertaining. It's fun. There's moments, though, where the humor doesn't necessarily work. There's moments where it's just really lame. And then the ending, I thought it was rushed, and I thought it could have been a bit better. But other than that, I enjoyed the movie. And I really don't know what else to say about the film except thanks for watching. And I will see you guys later. See ya.